Good morning. I am glad that you're with us as we begin another week of daily lectionary devotionals. This week from the daily lectionary, we're going to be focusing on the Old Testament selection, which is from 2 Samuel. We talked about 2 Samuel on Sunday, but a lot has changed since chapter 7. David has fallen from grace in many ways. He has committed acts of sin with Bathsheba against his wife and his family is starting to fall apart at the seams. A very difficult tragedy happened just one chapter prior when one of David's sons, Amnon, raped one of David's daughters, Tamar. A story that sadly is repeated even today. The story that we find in 2 Samuel chapter 13 is part of the aftermath of that story. Unfortunately, we don't get to hear much of Tamar's response to the story and what happened to her, but we do hear about what happened to Amnon, who committed the atrocity, and we hear about Absalom, who rose to Tamar's defense. Absalom invites Amnon and others to a feast, and when Amnon is drunk, Absalom orders his servants to kill his brother Amnon. In 2 Samuel 13, verse 30, we hear David hearing the news about this and responding to it. And we hear the beginnings of possible hope as well. In chapter 13, verse 30, it says, "While they were on the way, the report came to David that Absalom had killed all the king's sons, and not one of them was left. The king rose, tore his garments, and lay on the ground, and all his servants who were standing by tore their garments. But Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shimea, said, 'Let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons. Amnon alone is dead. This has been determined by Absalom from the day Amnon raped his sister Tamar. Now therefore do not let my lord the king take it to heart as if all the king's sons were dead, for Amnon alone is dead.' But Absalom fled. When the young man who kept watch looked up, he saw many people coming from Horonaim road by the side of the mountain. Jonadab said to the king, 'See, the king's sons have come as your servant said, so it has come about.' As soon as he finished speaking, the king's sons arrived and raised their voices and wept, and the king and all his servants also wept very bitterly. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. David mourned for his son day after day. Absalom, having fled to Geshur, stayed there 3 years, and the heart of the king went out, yearning for Absalom, for he was now consoled over the death of Amnon." It is nearly impossible for me to imagine David's emotional state throughout all of this, or Absalom's emotional state, or Tamar's emotional state, because Tamar too had lost a brother, and in many ways had lost a brother twice over. We hear at the end that David was consoled over the death of Amnon. Perhaps that this was because he recognized the severity of Amnon's sin and thought it was a fitting punishment. Perhaps it was because he had lost one son in Amnon and was heartbroken now over the possibility of losing the second, Absalom, permanently, as Absalom went into exile. We'll hear more about how this story develops in the coming passages, but I wonder how you see God active in David's tragedy and in tragedies that you yourself might have had to deal with. One truth about life is that we all experience trauma. God is with us through it, but God does not always blunt the pain. God instead weeps beside us, suffers alongside us, and we know this because of Christ. We can only hope that we can find ways to resolve our feelings that come from tragedy without the use of violence as Absalom had to resort to. But it's difficult sometimes, especially when the crimes are severe. I take hope in knowing that no matter the severity of the crimes, God is still present and with us. Would you join me in prayer? Sovereign Lord, forgive us for choosing violence instead of grace. Give us the courage to trust that the cross is more powerful than the sword. We thank you for the assurance that in the end, love wins. Help us to see that possibility even when suffering and tragedy and offense overwhelm us. Help us to live without fear in the light of your promise. Amen. Have a blessed day.